Hello, my name is Sabiha Sharif, and I'll be presenting Chapter 5, White Supremacy. Everybody is aware that white supremacy is prevalent, but they don't really understand how deep it is, how deep those roots are. So in the history, we used to gerrymander districts to help whites, and blacks were at a disadvantage. There's been police brutality against African Americans from the very beginning of time. And the gerrymandering and the poor and black neighborhoods and the white rich neighborhoods, dividing socioeconomically Caucasians and African Americans was always apparent. There's always been a long suppression of African Americans. And not only that, it's institutionalized in our policies, laws, rules, norms, and customs that have always given whites an advantage. Right now, there's more African Americans disproportionately in prisons. There are more black prisoners than there were black slaves in the early days. And our school funding system is based on property taxes, which has created a vicious cycle because if you're black and you're poor, there's less property taxes, which leads to poorer schools, not such a good education, which feeds into poor jobs and actually feeds into the prison systems. And this cycle just repeats. So there has to be a way to get out of it. Most people growing up in America, believe that white is better and it's superior. We've actually accepted the culture. You can see that name calling occurs as well as lynching occurs. But for most people, they witness a lot of microaggressions, that they're ignored or left out. White supremacy culture believes in white dominance and subordination. This can be complicated when you mix in gender, class, sexuality, and other social markers. For example, a black woman who's old and poor is going to experience this much worse than a young, rich black guy. So basically, white supremacists have always exploited and feel superior. From the early times that we've stolen the land away from the American Indians and we thought we had the right to dominate. And so there are always immigration restrictions. They regulate how many people come in so that they can always be the dominant majority. And when they do allow citizenship, they don't really regard them as such, like Mexicans and East Indians. I mean, we had the census to help appropriate funding more equilaterally, but even that's poor because not everyone fills out the census. There's also a phenomenon called colorism, that even within each race group, the lighter skinned people are considered more superior than the darker skinned people. In our housing, white middle class inheritance is 13 times that the income of blacks. And bankers always create racial divides by giving white people loans in white neighborhoods, black people loans in black neighborhoods. We need better policies for mixed income and integrated neighborhoods. Our educational system, I briefly discussed, it's 60% of black and Latinos go to schools of poverty. There was racial segregation in the beginning. Teachers presently in our schools, many of them are monolingual and white. They're not bilingual for our students. And even within the discrimination, there's further discrimination. Whites favor educated Asians over uneducated Asians. And minorities themselves are underrepresented at colleges. At the College of DuPage, there are many initiatives to increase the representation for both Hispanic and African American. And the reason they said when they were polled why they didn't like going to school is that they felt hostility and microaggressions, basically unwelcomed and unwanted. When they do get out, many of the jobs that African Americans get, for example, are positions of groundsman, sanitation, aides position. There are frontline workers. And you'll find that the frontline workers experience COVID disproportionately. African Americans are close to 1/3 of all the cases of COVID, and that's because they have comorbidity, many illnesses at the same time. They have lack of access to health care. They're poor and can't get it. And they're also our frontline workers, as I stated. They tend to be underpaid, and unemployment is also higher for minorities. Employers in a test did not interview people with Black names, and they tend to be laid off more. In healthcare, they distrust also the healthcare system. They live in food deserts where the fruit markets are not really apparent or around, and they don't live close to green spaces where they can exercise. They experience racial battle fatigue. Fighting off all those microaggressions on a daily basis is a lot, and they're made to not feel American. This is one article that I read on white supremacy culture. There are different aspects of it that allow that culture to flourish. One of them is perfectionism. This is having little appreciation for those that do work around you. And usually that credit goes to people who always get it anyway. And doing wrong is not differentiated from being wrong. There's no time to learn from the mistakes and don't appreciate what's right. Then there's sense of urgency. A lot of this is grants. We get grants from us, grant studies, and they ask for results in a very short period of time. So in that case, they tend to ignore minority opinion and go with the white minority. So that's where they get the continued sense of urgency. Defensiveness. I see this very apparently in the Trump presidency. Energy is spent to protect power rather than facilitate the best from each person. Criticize those in power considered rude or inappropriate. People defensive to new ideas, and it creates an oppressive culture. Quantity over quality. This is when they care more for numbers rather than emotions and feelings. And non-material things have no value. And same with worship of the written word. They only care about what's written down and not how info is shared, or good writers are prized over those who are not. Another article I read was avoiding racial detours. Is our commitment real? Are we just doing the token multicultural arts fairs and diversity clubs? Are we creating the illusion but actually just taking a detour? Racism is defined as a tangled structural mess of power, oppression, and unjust distribution of access and opportunity. So what we need to do is to fix the injustice, not the kids. I think in one school there was a diversity day, and that may have helped white kids feel superior by feeling like they did their token share of interacting with others. But the minorities felt that they were just being taken advantage of and didn't get anything out of it and were just exploited. So we got to treat the reactions rather than the problem. So how can we solve all this? Redistribute access and equity to learning material, technology, healthy food, and healthcare, and relatable curricula, and equity-conscious teachers, so there's equity for all. With the same opportunities, they can soar to the same heights as all others. Thank you.